It is now official starting time, and especially if you reckon by that clock. Welcome everybody to our colloquium today. Pleased to introduce my former colleague Renee Pfister, who's professor of mathematics and statistics at Murray State University, not too far from here. She will tell you what she works on. She has a PhD from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and works generally in the area of mathematical biology. Renee, thank you for coming.
Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it. I've known Wesley for a long time and a valued colleague, so I appreciate the kind offer. Come right on in. At least I don't lock my door like some of my previous colleagues. So if you would like to email me or talk to me later, there's my email address, and you can find me on Murray State's website. I didn't wear all my racer material today, but I got to get home to a ball game tonight, so after the talk, I'll be jetting out there. Because we play the #1 team, the men do, so I got to be there. My red hair gets going, so I go. I have a seat right behind the goal. So anyway, here we go. Am I not doing this right?
Is it on?
I thought it was on a minute ago. Did it turn off? There we go. Okay, so I always provide more than there is, but at 45 minutes I'm going to stop myself so that you can ask questions if you so like. So there are always more problems to talk about in the world. Nonlinear control is where we're going to start. Some of you already know about optimal control and optimization. That's great. So chime in if you want. We're going to talk about a little bit vein and singular control, and then cancer dynamics with delay. And I'll tell you kind of where these problems all came from. So I usually start this talk with these two pictures. Does anybody know what this first picture is? And I try to give welcome. It's due there. What are they?
Tumors.
Okay, what type?
Flat ones.
Flat ones? Right.
I probably shouldn't guess.
A plus. Those are actually particular colon cells, colon cancer cells. So when you have a colonoscopy done, and you should, okay, I'm here to also say that if you're 50 or over, you should have this done. These are cancer cells. Why do I put this up here? I had a dear grandmother who died of colon cancer, even though she had been tested all along, and it was within 1 year since her last colonoscopy, and it came up, right? It's a very quick-moving disease. This picture is of my brother. When he was 17 months old, we were both in the hospital together. I had the flu really badly in the 2 baby beds. My mother was in the room. But he died one night, right beside me. I was 2 and a half. I don't remember much before 6 years old, but at 2 and a half, I remember those alarms going off, and I remember what happened. Until about 3 years ago, I knew he died of cancer and had what they called a brain tumor, because we didn't find out. Let me give you a little bit of history. He was very colicky, that's what the doctor said, and at that time, they didn't do CAT scans on children. So when he died, they decided to do an autopsy, and they found a mass at the back of his spine, where his spine and his head is joined. And until 3 years ago, I did not know what it was that he died from. So let me get into this and show you that life has an interesting way of coming around. Some of you are undergraduates, is that right? Graduate students in the room? Do you know exactly what you want to do with your life?
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. That's good. I didn't. I went to school to be a medical doctor.
Okay.
Okay. So I followed a medical doctor around, and I was really good at mathematics, seemingly. And I decided that I didn't want to be a medical doctor the rest of my life. So I went to graduate school in mathematics and got a master's and a PhD, and I said, I will never be able to work in the medical field again. It was very disheartening to me. And when I went to graduate school, I found people who I could work with. So if you have a dream, don't let it die. Okay, that's another thing today. But we're going to talk about existence, characterization, optimality results. This is a paper that I wrote with Carl Panetta, who is at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital as a biomedical modeler. So the other thing I want to leave for you is that if you go to conferences and you know how to do something or think there's an idea, go talk to the speaker and say, here's my card, here's my information. You never know where it's going to lead you. Because I didn't know where this was going to lead me. I said, I can do optimal control pretty well. And I worked with him on several papers, and he had results, or he had information that I could use for St. Jude's. So here we go. Some of you had some biology, so we deal with these phases of the cell cycle. We have a G0 resting phase, a first gap phase, a DNA synthesis phase, a second gap phase, which is preparing for division, and the mitosis phase. The cancer cells, cancer drugs that I'm going to talk about today in this first problem deal with the hopeful eradication of breast cancer. Okay, so the reduction of breast cancer, and it was a tamoxifen drug that was being used at that time. But the take that we developed is that everybody was looking at the cancer cells. Let's decrease the cancer cells. But what's happening to what I call the good guys, right? What's happening to the normal cells? And here, P represents your proliferating cells that are normal. Q represents your quiescent cells that are normal. And then we have this relatively simple two-equation system, a differential equation. Delta is a growth term, gamma is a growth term. Delta is a death term for the proliferating cells. Alpha, if you notice, is negative here and it's positive here. So it's a transfer from the proliferating to the quiescent. This term here is our control. It also deals with the drug strength, S. So S becomes important because once you get too strong of a drug, does it make sense to you that it can be toxic to your system? Not only giving too much drug, but the strength itself may not increase your chances of survival. Okay. Down here, this is a differentiation term. So when you talk about differentiation, sometimes these cells can go either way, right? They can differentiate into a different component or can differentiate into a cancer cell. And then beta is that transfer rate for the quiescent cells. And then since everybody likes pictures, if you view this more in a graphical format, you can see what's happening with the proliferating and the quiescent cells. Okay, so in optimal control, you set up an objective functional. So in this standpoint, what I want to do is actually maximize this functional. So I'm maximizing, quote, the good guys with a constant in front of it as a weight term. So if somebody could remember that A is the coefficient of the proliferating in the quiescent cells, right, the normal cells. B over 2 here, B over 2 is the coefficient of the drug term. Okay, so if we can remember that when we get to the graphics, that'd be very helpful. Okay, so what am I trying to do here? I'm maximizing the good cells. Now, if you were talking about it from a cancer standpoint, if that was cancer, I'd be minimizing those cells, right? But remember, we're doing it from reverse. So I'm maximizing the good guys, and then I am maximizing a negative, which is a minimization of the drug situation. And everybody, doctors included, whenever Carl and I did this, they were like, why are you using a square? Anybody that's ever done optimal control before knows, or even if you've taken first semester calculus, if you have a function of x that's x squared and you need to find its critical points, then what can you do? You can take its derivative, set it equal to 0, and look at different things. If this term was linear, what happens when you take the derivative of a linear function? You just get the coefficient in front. So you have nothing to work with to try to find out what the representation of that control is to be. So at our first pass, what we were trying to do was to get something that we could work with, and then we would look at it from a non-engineering standpoint. So if you are looking at references to do this, control theory was really developed in an engineering field, right? It started off with discussion with thrust and all that. How do we get this spaceship to be on the moon, right? So these kind of ideas aren't new, but they're new to biology. So just so that you know where to look, there's a text by Fleming and Rischel was at the University of Kentucky, in which you can develop certain conditions to get existence. I work with engineers as well, and what some of my engineer friends want to do is they set up this problem and they go immediately to the numerics, or immediately to the, quote, answer. Let's get what the control equals. And being a little bit more of a mathematician, I cringe, because if you don't know an optimal control exists, why are you going to work the problem? Okay, so mathematically, I wanted to know this existed, and here are certain conditions in which you have to show that is true. So you have to know that it's non-empty, right? It's like a well-positiveness argument. You've got to have something to work with in your sets. The admissible control is closed and convex, so this is a compactness issue, right? The other thing is, and this control set is just all of my controls F, and F in this situation we're bounded between 0 and 1. So I'm talking about giving no drug or giving 100% of the drug. Okay. The right-hand side is continuous. It's bounded above by the sum of the boundary control and state, and it's a linear function of the control. This is really nice, but you can think about problems in which the differential equations have nonlinear controls in them. You cannot use these results with nonlinear controls in the differential equations. The integrand, I hope this makes sense, is concave. You've got a maximization problem. Now think about first semester calculus. If you have a maximization problem, with me, what do you want the second derivative to do?
Negative.
You want it to be
Exist.
negative. Well, you want it to exist. You want it to be negative, so you get concave down, right? Concave down idea. So this is the same idea. If you're looking at the integrand of the objective functional, you want it to be the second derivative with respect to that control to be negative, which it is in this case. Okay. Now, in optimal control, if you have two state variables, then you have two adjoint variables. Okay? It's very similar to Lagrange dynamics when you're doing optimization. You're appending the adjoints, or excuse me, appending the differential equations. So if we append those differential equations, then the adjoint functions that come out are a negative partial derivative of what I'll refer to as Lagrangian. Come on, Ian. With respect to the two states. One is our state P and our state Q. And then I can also get a representation of the control. And that just looks oh so simple for the cancer people to really use, right? But the nice thing about it is it only depends directly on the proliferating cells and the adjoint that's associated with that. All these other things are constant. Now, what does this mean? The minimum of 1 and the positive part of this entity. Well, I think we get the minimum of 1 and something else. Well, what does the positive part mean? Anybody? What do you think it means? It can be a min and a max of two things if you're numerically programming it. A positive part of something is the something if the something is positive, and it's 0 if the something is negative or 0. Okay? So that was just an easier way to represent. Okay, so what the heck is this Lagrangian? It's like a Hamiltonian, so if you've worked in Hamiltonian systems, then you form the Lagrangian of this entity, which is the integrand of the objective functional plus, now notice, these are like Lagrange multiplier ideas, right? You append the constraints to your problem, and then these are what I refer to as penalty multipliers. Now, you don't necessarily have to work it this way or think about it, but when I was trying to teach this to some students, because my students work on this, my undergraduate students work on this. I teach them optimal control, we work on it, then they go on and get a graduate degree. So that's been very beneficial. But these penalty multipliers are non-negative entities such that, it's coming on the slide, but these are equal to 0 when you're at the optimal. So it's like adding nothing if you're at the optimal control. Right? So what do? Calculus 1. Take the partial derivative of the Lagrangian with respect to your control and set it equal to 0 on the interior. So if you, F is strictly between 0 and 1. And let's see if we can go back. Usually I get students to do this, but I won't make you pop up and do that today. If I look at this, do you agree that the partial derivative of this Lagrangian with respect to F is going to involve something here, right? 2 times this entity, okay, it's going to involve this, and it's also going to involve this and this. Those are the only 3 terms that have it. Well, guess what? After you solve for this, this is exactly what happens. But remember, I instituted W1 and W2, right, as these factors, so I've got to somehow argue them out or get rid of them. So if I look at the different sets that I'm on the set where the control is strictly between 0 and 1, then from our mechanism, If it's strictly between 0 and 1, and I have W1 times F has to be 0, and W2 times 1 minus F has to be 0, then that forces the W1 and W2 to be 0. So, therefore, I have my guess for what my optimal control should be if I'm not on the extremes. Okay? If I'm at the top of my set, okay, W1 times F has to be 0, and if I'm at the top of my set, that implies that W1 is 0. Okay? W2 times F has to be, W2 times 1 minus F has to be 0, but that gives me no new information on W2, so W2 is just non-negative. And then if I use this idea from the previous slide, if W2 is non-negative, this is 0, and this is supposed to equal 1, then if I do a little bit of math, I'll get that inequality. And then likewise, I'll look at the bottom of my set. If my control is 0 for some time interval, then W2 is 0, and I get this entity. Well, if that happens, and W1 is greater than or equal to 0, then this stuff has to be less than or equal to 0. If I'm going to put all three of those cases together, then I have this scenario. So let's just look at one case. If F is supposed to be 1, then the minimum of these two things is supposed to be that, right? If we look at our previous idea, if you're on that set, this is the minimum of those two things. So you can put it all together in one step. Now the thing about optimal control is that when you try to get uniqueness, you can only get it for a small time frame. But remember, we proved existence of a problem for the full time, so we're good on that. So when you get uniqueness, you do it on a small time frame, and then what do? Bootstrap it up so you get uniqueness on the whole argument if you can. Okay? So this actually involves using some double-depth theory sometimes when you get, and some boundary results, Helder inequalities, those kind of things. Okay. So what is our optimality system? Optimality system is made up of the state equation, the adjoint equation, and the optimal control representation. So let's talk about this. If you know your optimality system is unique, therefore your control is unique, because your control is within that optimality system. If you can show the optimality system has a unique solution, right, your optimal control is within that, so you get uniqueness of the optimal control for free. That's really nice, right? Really nice. So let's talk about some pictures. Now, who remembers what A was? Coefficient of the
healthy cells.
The healthy cells, the good guys, okay? And B was the coefficient of the strength of the drug, the drug situation. Okay, great. Woo, that was 10 minutes ago. That's great. Okay, here we go. So this is just if A and B have the same weight, right? I'm not saying anything about what's more important. And the drug strength is 1. Now, why in the world did I use a time frame of 21 days? Because Carl told me to. Okay? Why did they do that? They usually have cycle drugs that go from 20 to 28 days. So he chose 21 days because what usually happens is they cycle on and off during a 21-day period, and then they have to have a rest period in which the person and or that person's body has to have time to rest. So this was a 21-day cycle. So what is this saying? The bone marrow cells actually are allowed to increase for a while. So the good guys grow, and I wait to give drug. Now, I'm a mother of 2 children, right? This is data from St. Jude, which is usually children-based. Now, this was breast cancer information, so it's not as children-driven. But if I were a mother of a child and they told me that my child has cancer and I'm going to wait 11 days before I give treatment, I'd have a hernia. And some of the doctors had a hernia with this information when it first came out. Okay? Because I'm telling them to wait until, well, a little bit later than day 11. It's like a day 13, and to give drugs. But notice what happens. If I'm looking at the healthy cells, I'm allowing them to grow, right? I'm allowing them to be more productive in that system. And then what happens is that the bone marrow cells decrease, but this 50% level is very critical because that's where, after the 50% level, you get neutropenia and other diseases in which you cannot give any drug. These children, In this case, these were adults, but these adults then cannot have any treatment until their neutrophils increase, and that can be a long period of time. So, yes, qualitatively, this is happening, that we wait to give drug, and that's a difficult concept for some of the doctors to accept. Okay, so we just have to work through the mathematics. Now look at this situation. Okay, I'm saying that A equals 2, so it's more important, right, to maximize the good guys, and it's less important, almost to equally important, to maximize the amount of, or minimize the amount of drug I'm getting. Negative of that. Still the same drug strength, and this is T equals 7 days. So notice what I'm saying here. Here's bone marrow. As I increase the importance of giving drug, I hope you realize that it makes sense that the bone marrow should decrease, right? If I'm giving more drug in general, then the bone marrow should decrease. But also what happens to the amount of drug that I give. I hope that makes sense too. As you increase the importance of giving drug, you should be giving more drug. So that's what the mathematics shows. That's good, right? That our mathematics is showing what you expect to happen in real situations. Now this was the best. Oh, I was so excited when this graph came. You know, when I was like, yes, this makes so much sense. Because what Carl kept saying to me is that it is better to give treatment on separate cycles than to give one complete cycle of treatment. To break it up into separate cycles. And you think, well, what's the difference? Right? If I give a 14-day treatment versus 2 7-day treatments, they're still 14 days. Okay? But when you do the mathematics and look at the graphics, let's look at this. When T equals 7, notice I have 2 different treatments of 7 days. So let's just look at the drug. This says to give drug pretty quickly, right? That makes me happy as a mother. Right, I'm giving the drug pretty quickly. I give it in a continuous manner, which means some people had pumps, but some people came in every day. So this isn't truly continuous, but it mimics on a continuous situation. And then what do? I give drug to about day 7. And then I wait to day 9, and I give drug again till day 14. Okay. Do you look at that? Let's look at what happens to the bone marrow. You go, oh no, the bone marrow decreases. But then after I have waited a little bit, it bumps up some, and then it still decreases. But notice why we did this, that magic 50% level. If you give treatment in a 14-day cycle and you don't have this respite or wait period, then I wait to give drug until till day 4, and I give drug almost continuously until day 14. If you do the math, you're giving drug less for this 14-day treatment. You wait and you give drug for 10 days. And you go, well, that's good. That's good. I don't have to go in and have another chemotherapy treatment or another tamoxifen situation. But look, is the bone marrow, the good guys, both decreasing to the same exact level? Yes. So our end result is the same. But what happened here is that I'm allowed to give more drug area under the curve. If I look at the area under this curve plus the area under this curve, it's 10% more drug for the same decrease in the bone marrow. Now remember, I'm looking at the good guys. But if I'm giving 10% more drug, the hope is, what is that 10% more drug doing? Killing the cancer cells. So, 2 different treatments, 2 different cycles, same 14 days, I can give more drug and affect better change than if I give it in one fell swoop. And both of these give a maximization for this problem. So I'm still getting the right result. Now, remember I had a unique answer to my problem, so that's good. The last thing I want you to see is that S, what happens to S? S was the coefficient of the S term, or the control. As S increases, we go from S equals 1, 2, 3, and 4. Notice there is a limiting situation happening. right? There's a limit to how much drug you're going to give too. You shift how quickly you start giving drug. But notice, if you go from 3 to 4 in drug strength, that's a 33.33% increase in drug strength, correct? Right? Go from just 3 to 4, figure it out, right? It's a 33.33% increase in drug strength. The decrease in bone marrow, still, what's happening with that? I'm still ending at the same level. But what's happening too? I increase the drug strength, and the bone marrow has potential to decrease more rapidly, even though it ends at the same level. So at these points of decrease, you can have more infections. Most people, from what I've learned, and I'm not the expert in cancer dynamics, right? I'm trying to do the mathematics behind it. But for most people, they don't die of the cancer, right? They die of a subsidiary disease, usually pneumonia, okay, for certain types of cancers, right? Their body gets so depressed that they cannot survive. Okay, I'll have to get a little faster. I did want to show you some different concepts. I also worked on, so that first, those were actually 2 papers with Carl that I did. Later on, I worked with some people at Harvey Mudd College, which is out in Claremont, California. Harvey Mudd is listed as the #1 undergraduate mathematics program in the nation. And these students will push you, okay? They come in taking Calculus 3, that's the first course they take. And some of them don't take that. They go right into real analysis. So I'm like, whew, okay, great. Awesome. These are the students I worked with. We had a group at Harvey Mudd. We had a group at Murray State. We collaborated. We went there. We talked. It was kind of a cool thing, right? Because my student could hold their own with those students. I was going, so I was just so excited when we got multiple papers out of this. And these undergraduate students were listed on the papers. Okay? They did a lot of the numerical work. But in this situation, we were talking about tumor cells incorporating natural killer cells, circulating lymphocytes, and the chemotherapy and drug therapy. Notice I still have this squared term for certain purposes, but I'll show you in a minute that we do look at the linearized situation. Now, I'm not going to go over every single one of these terms, but I think people notice the logistic growth. These are mass action terms with the chemotherapy and the tumor cells. But this is kind of a weird term. So if you look at work by Dopilus and Fraudianskaya, they have kind of coined this term in which this eta depends on how well the tumor cells and the natural killer cells combine. So there are powers of this. It's not just a Hawling 2 type form or a Michaelis-Menten type situation. And then we have these circulating lymphocytes and our chemotherapy. Now, if we just work this problem, this looks pretty good. Here's our control, but notice, I had to give drug for a long time. I had to give 100% of the drug, and then it tailored off. And this was a 35-day situation. The great thing is that the tumor cells died, right? They died. So, in actuality, it seems like you would quit giving drug at a certain point. But the minimization, now I hope you understand this, right? If you minimize a full interval and you try to minimize on 2 separate intervals, it doesn't give you the same answer, right? So you got to be careful that if you stop that, that you may not get the true minimization. So if we look at this where the doctors are happy, now why are the doctors more happy at this? I am minimizing the tumor cells and minimizing the area under the curve for drugs, so they understand that. It's total drug given, right? But the trouble is, as we just discussed at the very beginning, that if you were taking the derivative of that integral, just the integral, with respect to b sub m, you get epsilon, right? Actually, you get what's called a switching function, which is epsilon plus a certain adjuvant, number 4. So you'd like to know, this is the coefficient of the control, if you will. The coefficient of the control. So you'd like to know where that coefficient could be 0. Because if it's 0, it's called a singular control on a certain fundamental. You'd like to know where it could be positive and where it could be negative. Now let's see if this makes sense. If this partial derivative is positive, then I would automatically choose a certain bound. Let's see if you can think through that. if this control is bounded between 0 and 1, and if the coefficient of the control, which is here, gives you a positive result, and I'm maximizing this, should I choose the lower bound or the upper bound if it's a maximum? 50-50 guess. If this is positive and it's in front of my U, right? In front of my U or my control, V sub n, it's right there, and I want to maximize. Do I want to choose what's going to be multiplying by it to give me 0, or do I want to choose what's going to be multiplying by it to give me 1 times that? The answer is 1 times that, right? You want to get, if you're maximizing, you want to get up here. If you're looking at this and you get a negative value, if this turns out to be negative, then you would choose the 0, because that would be your minimum. So if for some reason you can get rid of the 0 case, then you would have what's called a bang-bang control, right? You're 0 at one point, you're 1 at the next. The medical doctors like this because this is how they give drugs, right? They give it for a certain period of time and then they wait and they give it again. Okay, now, this is what's so much fun, and this was a great story. The students at Harvey Mudd used Maple to do this. Okay? They put this in, they said, oh, we can wing this out. We can just do this. I said, great, do it. We worked it by hand. Guess what? 2 different answers. Right? They worked it in 30 minutes. It took us a day. Okay? So we got it all done, and we were checking all the terms. And Maple is great, except that it put some imaginary terms in there that didn't make any sense. Okay, so in a previous iteration of Maple, it gave us extra. Well, you would look at it and you'd say, well, when you set that equal to 0, it wouldn't give you the right term. It wouldn't give you the right answer. So we fought back and forth, and actually, what happened is you get these lovely terms. I'm just showing you that they're not easy, right? They're just tedious mathematics. So these were terms mu1 and mu2 that are in our answer. So when we get this answer, I've kept taking derivatives. So the point is you take the derivatives until the control shows up. Okay? You take derivatives until the control shows up. The control did not show up until the 4th iteration of the derivative. But remember, phi was set equal to 0 because I said we were singular on a certain region. I took the first derivative. If the function is 0 and it's differentiable, then the first derivative is going to equal 0. And then I substituted in the information I had in the adjoints as well as the initial differential equation. And then I continue this process. And then I always love this, right? We get an answer that looks like P over Q. Okay, P over Q is about 3 pages of work, right? P is 3 pages and Q is 3 pages of mathematical work. But anyway, that's okay. So the challenge is we have this switching function, and you can see I didn't even write out all the terms, but there they are in their glory. You get this switching function, and you need to analyze the switching function. And this is what is so disheartening to me when I go and I try to get in the head of a medical doctor, because you see the red and you see the green. Okay? The green is when you have no singularity. So you would give it as a bang-bang situation. If the natural killer cells in a person's body that you can get through a blood test situation, if they are anywhere you want to be, but the tumor volume is small, you do bang-bang. Which kind of makes sense. If you get it on and off, you'd still kill a majority of the tumor cells in this situation. If the natural killer cells are small, so your system is depressed, but the tumor burden is anywhere in this region, you can still give bang-bang because you're allowing your system to re-up, I guess is the word I want to use. But then the tumor cells will be minimized. All this red information is that you give it in a singular manner, which means it's a culmination of you start off at a bang-bang situation, and then you would follow the curve represented by my control, that negative P over Q. And if I have patient data, I can find that number for any given time. Now, it's not easy, right? I had all those partials and all that stuff, but you can find it because you have a numerical situation. What this tells me is that we're giving drug in the wrong way, right? If you give it in a bang-bang situation for certain patient parameters, is it ever going to minimize those cancer cells? We're actually increasing resistance. That's not in here. But what is your body doing? It's actually fighting off this drug, and it's not going to where it needs to go. Mathematically, that's the intuition there. So this was one of those aha moments that, especially the people that, there's an oncology group out there that they work directly with, that actually they go into the oncologist and work as a team. It's really neat, right? That the oncologist would sit down with them and have enough mathematical background to do that, and they're learning too. I'm learning every day, right, about what's going on. Okay, just to give you let me kind of skip through this, but let me show you. This concept is like a toxicity concept, right? Or in this situation, these were tumor cells. You want the tumor cells to stay below a certain volume, right? If they get too high, then you're in a lot of trouble. So you could put this in, and also this situation. If you solve this, I'm saying the area under the curve for the control should be less than or equal to some value. Does that make sense? That you don't want the drug in your system should not go above a certain level. The toxicity issue, right? So if we put these into the system and look at it from just an immunotherapy, this was, I don't know if you've heard about chemotherapy with immunotherapy. This was back in the 1970s, but it's becoming more prevalent, in which you're using your own immune cells that you take out and re-infiltrate into your body to see if you can use your own immune system to boost your immune component. Okay? So the sad thing is the blue here, which is a little bit you can see, is the tumor cells. If I just use immunotherapy, your own immune system, I can't control it, which is what they're seeing in the lab too. Okay? If I use chemotherapy, I can control it, but all these other things become out of whack. It's really hard to get somebody well, right? And then if I have an average immune system, I still can't control it with just immunotherapy. With chemotherapy, with an average immune system, notice, I can't control it at all. The tumor cell just cycles. So if you have a really strong immune system, you can control it. If you have an average immune system, which most of us have average immune systems, I just do what? I give a drug, it comes down, the tumor cell, it's never in remission. Okay, if I can have an average immune system and use both together, if I can use immunotherapy as well as chemotherapy, I can control it. Okay, so we'll see. People are doing this in this situation. Now, this is a mathematical component in which I'm taking in different forms of a control. This is chemotherapy, this is interleukin, and this is immunotherapy. So if I include all of these three things with these constraints, let me just get to the heart of the matter here. The challenge is you have three scenarios. These are those switching functions that I just talked about, right? If you're greater than 0, you should be at a certain level. If you're less than 0, you're at a different level. But if you continue in this manner, then you can get the representations of your controls. The challenge is the mathematical theory behind having multiple controls in that situation is not as clear as I'd like it. So there's a paper by Krenner that is absolutely great that just uses Legendre-Clef's condition. But it's hard to understand in the sense that if you have three controls, if you hold one, then you can look at two at a time. So that's what we looked at pairs. But if you wanted just to look at all three separately and try to figure out what was going on, we still haven't figured it out. So we're working, but anyway, we can't necessarily do it. But the nice thing to find out is if you allow just one to be singular and the other two are bang-bang situations, I can find the representation for the control. And also, I can tell you on which intervals it'll be minimizing by a certain constraint. I can say, here's numerical results. It has to satisfy this condition. Therefore, it creates a minimum by Legendre-Clef's condition. Okay, and then there are some conclusions. What I want to get to is some delay work. And I'll say just a few things here. In the delay work, I worked with a colleague from Murray State on this concept, and it makes sense, I hope, to you and to me, that when you're given drug, it doesn't automatically go to the exact site that it's supposed to, right? So there's a delay in when that will get to the correct site, or if it does at all. And there's a decay that occurs, right, for that drug. It's going to have an exponential decay, a release rate. The other thing about this is that it relates to what's called neuroblastoma. So I'll show you a few results, and I'll be done on time, as I said I would be done. But here's the deal. My father, who is a chemical engineer, came to my talk once upon a time. My family's very dear to me. So I said, okay, Dad, let's just come. I was more nervous than if I had 500 people in the audience. But anyway, he came, he sat on the front row, and after the talk he said, Renee, did you know that neuroblastoma work that you're doing, that's what your brother died from? I never knew. So why am I saying this? I had a dream that when I went to college, I was going to find a cure for cancer. I still have the essay that I wrote. Okay? I haven't found a cure for cancer and thought my dream was over when I decided not to be a medical doctor. But in a very unique way, I've been able to come back around and work on neuroblastoma and provide results for people that there's only a 20% success rate for children who have neuroblastoma. So I've been able to provide information that might help that other child. So it's really a cool little story, right? That mathematics can get you to your dreams. There you go. So let me just get to these pictures. Let me actually explain something here. Here I'm using a control that's quadratic, and these deal with different forms of the cancer cells, and here's my interleukin. So the thing that I wanted to do here was to deal with the immunotherapy component. So what we found is with the delay, if F wasn't 0, the cancer grows, and I give drug the whole time. Can't control it. That makes sense to that. Then, if I chose F in increments of powers of 10, then there's a change here. I didn't have to give as much drug for this situation, so I was making it more important to include the interleukin. Okay? So if you include things that will increase your immune system, then I can control the cancer. Different concavities, but I can still control it with a delay. Now, the one thing that we haven't done, this was a constant delay. And as we well know, all of our systems are very different. So what happens when you get a delay that depends on other things? Haven't gotten there yet. Okay? Lots of problems to work on. So I very much, and there are references here, and they have my talk, so if you want to see the references later, you're welcome to do that. If you're interested in optimal control, there's a book that I didn't list that's by Linhart and Workman. That's a very good undergraduate, upper graduate level text. And I should say that the National Science Foundation has been very supportive of this research, and I appreciate that. I'm also affiliated with what's called the BioMaths program, which is a biology and math program for students that get together and work all year long on problems, and they help fund this type of research with students. And then for Murray State University for letting me do this type of research that does involve sometimes some situations that some people may not agree with. So I appreciate the support from my university. So thank you very much for your time.
Questions? Oh, I have one.
Wesley always has one.
So for the singular control, how good is the drug delivery technology for being able to do a singular control? Because I mean, the thing with the bang-bang control is drug delivery is essentially trivial. Do they have the technology to do a singular control?
They do have the technology now. If they do, it is a different question.
Right?
You can tell how much to give, and then you can decrease it. The way I understand it is if you have a pack, right? Okay. They can do it just like a diabetic has certain pulses. They can do this with a chemotherapeutic type of pack. Now the question is more so if people are willing to do that, because models, people still get uncomfortable with models, even though we have validated them with data that we have. So that's the best I can do with that. And I'm just pleased that the medical community has changed in the last 10 years. When I first started working on this, you know, when I started knocking on doors, they were shut. Okay, and I had to find a way in the back door, right? A biomedical modeler who was out of place, right? I mean, you keep asking questions. Anyway, yeah.
What makes you believe that the discrete delay is appropriate to model this? Why not continuous delay? Because biological phenomena usually grow continuously, not discrete.
But a lot of problems have a delay that is discrete. The cancer may grow for a certain time and not grow at all.
But how do you know tau?
How do you know tau in my model? That's what I said. This was just an initial work, right? We just chose tau to be a 2-day increment of time based on the data that we.
You could take a continuous model and limit it.
Sure. You could do that, absolutely.
Question. You were showing on one of those slides the increase in the constant for drug strength as you were delivering it, and it said that as you increase the drug strength from the third to fourth level, there was a sharp drop off, sudden drop off in the bone marrow cells. That was the biggest concern.
Right.
Okay.
That's the biggest concern.
So is it whenever there's a sharp drop off rather than a long tail drop off? These, is that when the infections happen more often, more
That's
severe
what my
infections?
understanding is, that you have more susceptibility issues.
Okay.
Right? So when there's a sharp drop-off, it's just like if you think you feel kind of bad during the day and your temperature increases, then you're more susceptible to other things as you go throughout the day. I mean, just a very trivial example, but yes, that's the understanding. So that's why they... You know, you see lots of people with masks or children are put into facilities in which they can't be around us. They just carry normal germs that they can't handle.
Yeah, in your very first model, so you have a control function F and only depends on T.
Yes.
Then when you maximize it, you get a result also depends on P function.
Yes, it does.
So
But P also depends on time.
I know, but have you considered maximizing with respect to P and T at the same time?
You can maximize, I am maximizing P, but not with respect to P. I'm maximizing with respect to the control. You can maximize with respect to the time, which would then indirectly maximize the P as well. So in the objective functional, I'm maximizing P directly, but not with respect to it.
But the P does depend on F, doesn't it?
Yes. So P depends on F because the differential equation had the control in it. So it's kind of a cyclical concept there.
Did you think about stochastic?
Yeah, that's a great question. I
just wondered,
I have not done too much with stochastic situations, but yes, that's always a question that people ask.
The Norwegian, Oxenbergers, very fond of control, optimal control.
So you use these Ito type representations, and then you
never stop.
work on it with Brownian motion. Yes. So there are lots of different formats where you take integral representations in conjunction with stochastic information. So, 24 hours in a day.
It would scare the medical community, I think.
Yeah. If you talk about chaos theory or something, they don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, I have another one.
Okay, great.
So I see again that model so you're using kind of compartmental models, right? Compartmental models. So
Compact.
Compartmental.
Compartmentals, yes.
Yeah. So, what are your assumptions to obtain when you obtain that differential equation?
What are my assumptions?
Yeah.
Well, we're just trying to model the situation as it is, right? So we model it, and then we use that model based on patient data to see if that model is giving what that data should suggest.
Yeah, I see, but I mean, you can't use the data from the patients directly, so you have
different
models.
Patients, right?
Yeah, I see. But what is your key point? So in compartmental models, so like we have some basic assumptions, then I wonder that what kind of assumptions you put on your differential equation and obtain that differential equation.
I don't guess I understand what.
So how do you obtain that differential equation?
How do you derive the equation?
Derive the equation.
We just use mass action kind of terms, and we derived that equation using those concepts of what we thought the growth was. We've had different problems where we dealt with different growth based on Gompertzian, logistic, Norton-Simon hypotheses, all these kind of things for those aspects. So we based it on assumptions that we'd already used successfully in previous papers. So I don't know, and we used patient information to see if mass action was appropriate, or if we had to have some Michaelis-Menten type terms or Holling-2 type terms to get the results that we needed for the initial problem without any control. Right? We had to make sure that whatever model we came up with made a heck of a lot of sense without putting any control in it, because if we put the control in it and didn't make sense to begin with, for this patient, it's not going to make any sense to make any justification on different patient evaluation. Best answer I can give there for that.
And you said you did some numerical work.
I am not the numerical person, so let me be clear on that. I have done numerical work, and we use MATLAB for most of our cases with a when they cut a fourth order type situation where you use the state equations moving forward in time, the adjoint equations moving backward in time, and then you update the control. So yes, I know what to do, but my convergence does not always happen. But yes, that's why I find other people that are very good at that. So yes, we did do all of these, all the graphics that we have, we did it in hand. And there is also, of course, MATLAB has some more updated stuff, but there's a program called MISER, M-I-S-E-R, that does optimal control aspects pretty much for you using different conditions of, you got to get it in its right format, but yes. And 2-point boundary value problems, we used Ermentrout's work and all that kind of stuff to get them. Hackbush is a good example of work that deals with 2-point boundary value problems in an optimal concept. So you may have more knowledge on numerical concepts for this than I do.
Okay, for the second equation, it's not even proven that when we put out method convergence was alright. For the nonlinear equation,
for
those quadratic logistic terms.
For those logistic terms, but in taking the adjoint system and the state system together with the control, we can get convergence of this. We can get that we converge to a solution.
And what is the rate of convergence?
I don't know that. But it's not, in this problem, it didn't take very long to converge to the right result. I mean, I've had problems that we've sat at the computer and let it go for days. I'm working on a problem right now in wound healing that won't converge because there are some very complicated intricate terms that are causing they're causing blow up in a finite time.
These are nonlinear?
They're nonlinear.
Yeah.
They're nonlinear, and we've used...
Next problem is the blow-up time, it's not computing.
Right.
The method is not giving the blow-up time, right?
Right. And it's very difficult because we know what should be happening, and it does happen for a small time, but then after that, I can't control it, and that... It's very difficult, yeah. So, yeah, that was last night's, actually, argument. I'm working with somebody from Western Kentucky University on that mechanism, and so, anyway.
Non-standard methods.
Non-standard methods are...
Standard in textbooks are not.
Yes, it's not working. Not working. That's what it's all about, right? You just keep working. And I'm tenured, so right, I can just work on it. I'm a full professor tenured, and I can work on problems that don't have to. Yeah, it's a little different. If you're a probationary faculty member, you got to have some results, right? I can work on a problem for 6 or 7 months and still.
Be happy to be at Morris State.
Yes, I'm happy to be at Morris State. I like my job a whole lot.
Is there anything else? I hope many of you will be able to join us for a small reception up on the 3rd floor in the math library. Renee, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.